Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet, and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met while I was supporting a client transforming their business. And I needed finance director support and reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends who share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest episode with David Bell. David is a multi-award winning entrepreneur, business leader, and technology consultant, helping ambitious organizations to grow, scale, and innovate. As founder of Simboc, he works with startups and SMEs to unlock opportunities through strategic advice, leadership support, and practical digital solutions. David is also an entrepreneur in residence at Anglia Ruskin University, a fellow of several professional bodies, and an experienced keynote speaker and chat show host. David, welcome to Strive and Thrive. It's nice to see you. Can we start, please, by giving us, a 1 minute summary of your journey today?
Yeah. Firstly, thank you very much, Romesh and Mike, for having me here today. Absolute pleasure to star with you two in the studio today. Look, we're going to have some great conversations, but I'm sure we'll expand and explore a bit further. But my background started off when I left school. It was when you were allowed to stay or you could leave school at 15, and I did. And I set up my first business, a tech company, an IT company. And I always wanted to work for myself, following my dad's footsteps. And I started up by just working locally, fixing computers for kind of residential, blended into smaller businesses, sacked the residential clients because I realized that B2B was much more important, much more rewarding as well. And I grew that over the next 15, 16 years with a business partner. We escalated into other areas and other fields, and we got known as a telecommunications provider, providing wireless connectivity, outdoor and indoor, point-to-point, point-to-multi-points. We become one of Motor's biggest application partners in Europe, Middle East and Africa. And then in 2014, I had my midlife crisis. We'll explore that further if you like. And I decided to exit that business and focus on helping other business owners, helping them on their journey, taking the right steps, still around tech, how you can utilize technology to really systemize, automate processes in your business. So when you're sleeping or when you're on holiday, God forbid you ever get one of those and you're sitting on the beach, you have that opportunity to know your business is still working for you when you are taking some time out and relaxing. And you mentioned things like Anglia Ruskin University, the Federation of Small Businesses. I've worked with lots of other enterprises and helped them along their way as well. So that's a very light touch, but it's been a 30 plus year journey, learning every day. Every day's a school day, and helping others break their mold as well and do something different.
Interesting. Really nice to meet you, David. So you started. Let's dig into your technology company a little bit. So you talked a bit about what it did, but what was your? How did that business evolve? What was the driver for the success of it? What made you learn to move away from households into B2B, to evolve it? What was your experience there?
So when I set the business up, as I say, it was kind of local papers when people used to read an old-fashioned newspaper, advert in there. I can't remember what it was. It was like £40 a week to put an advert in there, like a box advert. And that really reached out to the kind of the consumer market. But what I realized with the consumers, they want you 24/7, 365 days a year. And what really was the icing on the cake was when we were selling. So this were the days you used to build computers, you used to build a PC, put the motherboard in the case, used to build it up, processor, RAM, the lot, hard disk. And it was when a client reached out to me on Christmas Day. So they bought a computer from me, and on Christmas Day, they couldn't plug the mouse and keyboard in. The old PS2 round connectors they could get round the wrong way. And that's what they did. And foolishly, I answered the phone on Christmas Day. And that to me was my family time. And I realized at that point hey, the consumer market's not for me. And we already had some business clients, and that's where the focus then really went on businesses and supporting them. So we grew that locally, so based in Essex. So we grew that in and around Essex, but that reached out to London, home counties, and then started to give us further reach across the country, because we were working with businesses who had their head office in London, but then had their satellite offices in Manchester, Birmingham, Scotland, for example, even into kind of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And we did a great job. You know, we were, bear in mind, IT back then was more complex and complicated, in my opinion, what it is today. You know, it wasn't plug and play and just switch something on and away you go. There was a little bit more contextual setup and rollout required. So we got known for being good at what we did. But the magic really changed. Our business developed and changed when in 1999, and I remember this quite clearly, one of our business clients come to us and said, look, we've got 2 offices. They're a mile apart, and we need to be able to move telemetry, information backwards and forwards, so network data. And we were already doing infrastructure, so cabled networks, but we needed to connect 2 offices. And I don't know if you remember the days of, kind of dial-up modem systems, when it used to screech at you and stuff like that. Yeah. So these were the days where data through typical telephony lines was super slow. And we found a supplier at the time. They were called Orinoco, and they did an outdoor point-to-point wireless link. And that was our first commercial wireless link we installed. And we saw a niche in the market that was not being offered by anybody else. And very quickly, we moved more heavily into that market. Free space optics, which is basically fiber through the air. So it's like a beam of light through the air with no cable. So it's a laser beam. We got involved with licensed and unlicensed radio. And we become an application partner, a delivery partner for Motorola, which led us into many different areas, opened lots of different doors, and allowed us to work with global blue chip companies delivering projects globally, onshore and offshore around the world as well.
So tell me a bit about David. What was your role? Were you the technical person who would build the PCs, or are you the person who's led the strategy, or have you done all of it? Are you sales? What's the role you've played in this journey? Because obviously you've evolved the business to the opportunities.
Yeah. So I think like when you start out and build a business, you're everything, aren't you? You are the salesperson, you are the administrator, you are the T-boy, the marketeer, you are the people person, HR. You wear all hats. But as that grew, so about 6 months after I started the business, it was just me. And at the time, my girlfriend was assisting me. But after that, I brought on board my business partner, someone I'd known for many years. We went to school, or we didn't go to the same school, but we kind of knew each other through school connections. And he was doing an old-fashioned YTS program where you'd get paid something like £27 a week. And I reached out to him and said, look, do you want to take a bit of a risk? And he was like, what's that? I said, look, I need someone to come and work with me. I think we know each other. We work well together. But if there's no money at the end of the month to pay us, then that's the way it is. But hopefully that won't be the case. And actually, it was never the case. But he took that risk and we become business partners. So he took on more of the technical role. I took more of the sales and marketing role. And together we were joint managing directors, if you like. So we were both growing and leading the company. And as the company grew, we brought the right people in. People that were better than us, and I think that's very important. That they were better at marketing, they were better at administration. Our job was then to kind of be the strategic lead. But I always rolled my sleeves up. I still was hands-on. I still loved the technical aspect, getting out there, working with the engineers that we had, sitting in the high-level meetings, trying to win the business. I don't think you ever lose that when it's your business. As much as you do want to hand some of it over, you've got to keep your finger on the pulse.
How did you find it?
Sorry, Mike. Yeah. Can I just ask? So joint MD. How did that dynamic work? Because I can imagine that when it works well, it's extremely powerful and complementary. But there can be difficulties and challenges with that setup as well. How did you find that?
I'm sure in some businesses that would not work. I could see loggerheads, fights, discussions breaking out into kind of feuds and stuff like that. But we were very lucky. We never both wore the title managing director. I took the sales and marketing director. He took the technical director. Our official roles around that. Of course, now you'd rebrand that CEO, CTO and stuff, but we're talking old-fashioned terminology. And look, we were very different. We had the same ambitions, the same goals, and we were a month apart in age as well, so we're very closely aligned in that respect. But he was super laid back. And if he listens to this, he wouldn't say anything different. Hopefully, I don't think either. But Chris was super laid back in the respect he'd like to have time to think about things. So, there was times that I'm very the opposite, by the way. I want to do here and now. Let's just go with it. It might not be the right decision, but we could miss the opportunity if we don't dive in now. Where he was like, whoa, brakes on. Let's think. Let's go home. Let's sleep on it. Let's come back tomorrow morning or next week and decide. And that was a contrast, but it worked because sometimes I won that argument. It was like, no, we're going now. And other times he was like, no, brakes on, we'll do it tomorrow. And both of those outputs helped us. On occasions, we were in the right place at the right time because we were early. On other occasions, because we sat back, it was the right decision because if we would have gone too early, we would have lost out. So it was a relationship of trust. It was a relationship of knowing how each of us work. And it was a grown-up conversation. Look, I'll be honest, there was times that we had some heated discussions, but in 18 years of working together, that many maximum, 5, no more than, where we kind of fell out that day, kissed and made up the next. It's simple and as quick and easy as that. It was business. We did lots of stuff of travel together. So, we knew each other very well in a personal aspect as well, which again, I think helps tremendously in that trust relationship. So for us, it worked, but I wouldn't suggest to everybody it can work.
What are the fundamentals to make a relationship like that? Well, what are the essentials that you would say is the bare minimum to even entertain a scenario like that?
Well, the first one is definitely trust, but trust is built. You don't necessarily want to trust everybody overnight. So we knew each other, which was key here. So it's not like we bumped into each other and said, let's do this. We'd known each other for a number of years prior to that. Not in a business capacity, because neither of us had run a business until this point. So, we were young. We were 17, if you like, 17, 18. So we were young. And hey, look, we made some mistakes. We can talk about those in a minute. But for me, it's about that knowing each other, the friendship, the trust. It's kind of listening. It's really important. I talk lots about this to my clients I work with and anyone I bump into. We've got to listen. We've got to appreciate other people's opinions. We're not all the same. We have different outlooks on life. We have different values in life. But that's really important. Those values have to align. And Chris and I, our values were pretty similar. I'm sure there'd be one or two that was slightly differently, but when we run that exercise time and time again, our values aligned, our personal values as well as our business values. And that meant trust was formed. And that meant I could trust him with my life. And sometimes that was the case. We were working on motorway networks, high in the sky, up structures and stuff like that. So we had to trust each other. And the team was built around us like that as well.
Interesting. So you exited that business. What was that experience like for you and Chris? And how did you find that journey? Did you come to the end of your road? Was it an opportunity to try something new? What was the personal experience of that exit?
So this is the absolute God's honest truth. So what happened in December 2013, Chris and I used to get together, like most people, regularly to sit down, dissect and kind of look through where we are. We were sat down in December to talk about what 2014 looked like. Where are we going? What's the roadmap? And we were sitting down at a pub called the White Hart. They do a nice breakfast in there. And we were sitting there having our breakfast and we were just chatting through, kind of planning out our strategy. And Chris said to me, just kind of, God, look, you're really busy. At the time, I'd already had Simboc. It was running. It was bubbling in the background. I wasn't spending much time on it. And he turned around and said, how are you going to manage all of this? Bear in mind, in the past, I've had some other businesses that run alongside as well. One of those we talk about a pub. God knows why, but I bought a pub, and that was a very interesting experience in itself. But Chris said to me, "How are you going to, juggle, the tech company APC and working at Simboc?" And I said, "I don't know." And I said, tongue in cheek, and it was an absolute joke at the time. I said, "Just buy me out." And he looked at me and he smiled. I looked at him, I smiled. And on the 1st of January, the deal was done. So, it was a very different way of doing it, because maybe in some other companies, it doesn't happen like that. But it was a change of direction. I wanted to do something different. We've done 18 years of working together, great experience. I wouldn't change it for the world, of course. But I knew for me that there was more for David. I wanted something different. And in all honesty, Chris and I had the same end goal in mind, or potentially the same end goal, where we'd want to take the tech company. But there was becoming a slight difference on the journey of how we got there. So not that we had to say we didn't argue, we didn't debate, but that may have happened if we would have carried on together. So this was an opportunity for me to take a fresh break and do something I love, which is helping others. That was the focus now. So the change of direction was just a natural. It was something that just happened in the spare of a conversation.
I love that. I want to tap into serial entrepreneurship, because that's where I think you're going to talk about next. But expand on your experience of the pub. What took you in that route? And you must have a view on where the pub market is right now as well, I guess. But what was your experience with that?
I mean, this was back in 2002, 2003. So my oldest son, Oliver, who's now coming up for 23 or 24 this year, to me, this was, I don't know, maybe too much EastEnders at the time. Not that I watched that time now, but it was almost like a Grant Mitchell, Phil Mitchell kind of, there's a pub available. And I decided to, take on this pub. My in-laws at the time, they run it, managed it. I had nothing to do with the day-to-day ops or anything like that. But I kind of did the admin behind the scenes. I don't know why I did it. It was one of those spare of the moment. It was just like, it sounds like a good idea. And hey, why not? It's a different business, something to try. And was it a failure? Overly, probably. Did we lose money in it? Maybe a little bit. It was an experience. It showed me, actually, pub life is not for my life. And I wouldn't necessarily go back into that. But it was great. We got to meet lots of great people. And it was another business to try and see what it was like. But, yeah, talk about pubs today. Tough market. It was tough then. And it's even tougher now.
It's brutal right now, though. I think that market at the moment, I think there's so many for sale, so many landlords struggling in that. And I think your experience there is probably manifesting itself in lots of pubs right now, I think. What's your view on serial entrepreneurship? Obviously, that's where you've gone. That's what you've been doing now the last 10 years, I guess, since you left your tech business. What's your view on that experience for you as a person?
Look, it's not for everybody. There's some people that are love what they do, can wake up and, they're very idea driven, they're innovative, and, entrepreneurship is possibly for them, but it's not for everybody. So if there's people listening to this and they're thinking, how do I become an entrepreneur? Well, first off, is it in your heart? Is it in your blood? Is it something you want to do? One of the questions I get asked quite a lot is, can you teach entrepreneurship, or is it something you're born with? Is it just something, is it part of your DNA? Is it part of your makeup? Is it? And look, I'm sure you can teach it. We'll come on to this, but I support a university, Anglia Ruskin University, have done for over a decade, worked with some amazing minds, those that are on their journey to becoming entrepreneurs and creating great businesses and stuff like that. But there's also a lot of people that go through university life trying to learn how to become an entrepreneur. And can you teach it? Well, you can teach it, but can it be then delivered afterwards in a real world scenario? And that bit I'm not 100% sure of. My journey, I just remember at 7 years old, I was entrepreneurial. I was charging people to come in my back garden to use the swimming pool in the height of summer. And I was charging 20. True story. I was 7 years old, and we lived on a long street. I don't know, 100 odd houses down each side, something like that. And, lots of my school friends and brothers and sisters of school friends and stuff like that. And it was a hot summer's day in August. We had 2 paddling pools, a little rope swing, a slippery slide, and the ones with fairy liquid. It was just a sheet of polythene back in the day, by the way. They didn't make these as industrial purchases. And I charged them all 20p. That's a lot of money then, yeah? So we're talking 1985, 4, somewhere around there. And I charged them all 20p to come in. And I was making a fortune. I mean, that garden was full. It was like a festival. But this is the day where the back door opened and I heard David, at the top of my mum's voice. I knew I was in trouble. I went and saw my mum. She said, get everybody out. They're not allowed in here. Look at the people in the... So I had to dismiss them all. And this was my first part of business where I learned that customer service is super important, because I had to refund them all their 20 pence pieces. So actually I didn't make any money in that particular experience. But that was my young entrepreneurship. I had paper round, 5 paper rounds. I never delivered a single newspaper. Well, I did at first, because I actually learned employing somebody. So I employed somebody or 5 other people to do the paper rounds for me. I think I got paid about £4.50 per paper round. It was a yellow advertiser, so it was one of the free ones. And I then got someone else to do it, and I paid them half of that, because they weren't old enough to get a paper round, because you had to be 13. So they went and delivered all the newspapers for me, and I paid them. My job was to manage them. So I used to ride around on my bike, making sure they'd put them through the doors properly, because it was my neck on the line, and they hadn't dumped them in the local bin. So that was about managing people. And then I suppose my next big step in entrepreneurship, this is, again, I was only 14, whereas when I was riding around on my bike, checking they delivered the newspapers, I saw a notice on a notice board. Don't see notice boards anymore, do you? Where people used to write out hand notes and stick them up with a drawing pin. But there was a notice on there. It said gardener required. I thought, oh, it sounds good. Gardener, £5 an hour. Now, that was a bloody lot of money back then. So I applied for the job. I went home, picked up the old-fashioned phone, because mobiles didn't exist. And by the way, just to tell you what my life was like, we had a payphone in my house. So, and the reason was because my sister used to abuse it, phoning everybody. So you had to put 10 pence into the phone as well at home. And I phoned the number and I said, you're looking for a gardener? He said, yeah, I am. I said, okay, can I pop round and have a look? And he went, absolutely. So it wasn't too far away, jumped on the old BMX and rode round the corner, knocked on the door, bang, bang, bang. And he answered and he looked at me and he's like, hello. And I said, I'm here for the gardening job. And he was like, you're about 12 years old, 13 years old. And I was like, yeah. He said, what do you know about gardening? I said, well, I know how to use a lawnmower. I know how to do some weeding. And he's like, you can have the job. So I then got my first gardening job, which actually blossomed into a very good relationship, and it opened lots of other doors for me as well. So, yeah, I think you've got to take chances. I used to go car washing, carol singing, you name it, anything to make £1 or £2. That's what life was about. So in my heart, I think you are born with entrepreneurship. You have that want and need and drive and ambition. Can you teach it? Yes, I think you can. But will that person that's taught it have the same drive? That I don't know. And maybe Harvard University could tell us if that's the case or not. But that's just my experience.
I think people are still validating it. Is your driver money? Is it the money that motivates you, or is it something about seeing a challenge, seeing an opportunity, going after something interesting? How do you see that balance between that equation when you're on an entrepreneurship journey?
I think you have to have a balance. Look, my driver is not money. In the early days, potentially, yes. It was about, look, how much money can we make and stuff like that. I think today I probably give more than, I give more in, free support, free advice, free guidance. I wear a hat for the Federation of Small Businesses as a volunteer, have done for 18, 19 years. That took a lot of my time. Never got paid for that. They covered some travel expenses, but that's about it. I'm a STEM ambassador. So that's going into school, secondary education, primary education, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. Go in there and giving up time and, talking about my career path or helping with particular events and stuff like that. I mentioned Anglia Ruskin University, where I go in and work with them as well. And yet some of that you do get paid for. But majority of it is you're giving up your time through mentorship and guidance and stuff like that. So the money's not the driver. It used to be. I need to put food on the table and roof over the head like everybody. I have bills to cover and stuff like that. But for me, the driver is change. It's seeing that knowing that you've helped somebody, knowing that you've made a small difference in their journey. And I love that. I believe what comes around goes around. So if I can help somebody, maybe when I need that assistance, that help, that guidance, someone will help me. But it's not all about the money. But let's be honest, it does help grease the wheels a little bit and make things more pleasurable.
David, I've known you for a little while, but I didn't realise you'd started quite so early on your entrepreneurship journey. What a brilliant story. There's so much to unpick there. So if it's okay, I'm gonna kind of summarise. So I just kind of want to organise some of these ideas in my head. That's how my brain works. But a couple of observations from me, I guess. So the first one is when you sold your business to your partner. So just going back to that, for me, I think the takeaway was that you both asked the right question at the right time. And that was a point of reflection. Mm-hmm. And that was something that you obviously had practice in and had been doing regularly in terms of just catching up, talking, and thinking about the future. And you created that opportunity, right? And that leads to something else, which I think links very much to your entrepreneurial journey from such a young age. You were creating opportunities, weren't you? Or you were sensing there was an opportunity there and you were going for it. And I think that's a key attribute to successful entrepreneurs. So yeah, it's good to see that in your story and done so effectively. It's nice to see the win-win approach as well. That's something that Mike and I kind of really, I suppose, we subscribe to. We're supporters at Strive and Thrive of the triple bottom line, like people, planet, profit. And I think ultimately that means you're looking for a win-win scenario in business, so that everyone comes out hopefully better off. So that's a really, really good approach. But I think a really key area maybe we could explore a bit more, and Mike, I'd love your views on this, is that balance between pure natural entrepreneurship and that innate ability, which David, you clearly have in abundance, right? What a compelling story from such an early age. And you talked about the fact that, you believe it is possible to learn, but how that works and interacts is, I suppose it can vary. I mean, from my experience, and I'll ask Mike the question in a second. From my experience, I was absolutely not an entrepreneur. Right? I was very much, following a career path, professional services as an accountant, and then kind of going up the ranks firstly in big corporations and then in SME businesses. And I think for me, I learned by osmosis from hanging around with entrepreneurs and being a CFO or finance director in quite successful startups. I gradually built up, I suppose, the confidence to actually say, well, this is really exciting. You're in control, you're doing some pretty amazing things. And, you are helping, you're employing people, you're building something special. And I observed that. And for me, it was a confidence thing, I suppose. And so ultimately, spending all that time at SMEs gave me the confidence and helped me build up that confidence to go, you know what? Yeah, let me try this. Let me try and build a business myself. So yeah, and my approach, like yours, David, because you mentor and support, but actually you also, you're learning as well, right? So I'm continually trying to learn, but also trying to go boldly forwards as well. Mike, you were a kind of late starter in the entrepreneurship journey as well. What are your reflections on this? It's a really interesting.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't like you, David. I wasn't that person who got all those, stole all the money off my friends at school. Provided value to them. Provided it value to my friends at school for money. But I've always been interested in change and transformation and doing new things and exploring new ideas. And I think that's where I found entrepreneurship as my exploitation route for what I was really, really interested in. And I think touching on the question of can it be trained, or is it something that's innate, I guess, is the ultimate sort of binary position. I think I've worked with a number of universities now teaching entrepreneurship, similar to yourself. And what I would say is that it's maybe a little bit like a sport and a sportsman and a sportswoman and a sportsperson, in that you can teach anyone to play football, but you can't always teach someone to be a Premier League professional footballer at the highest level. And I think that means they can be very good at what they're doing, but maybe they're not going to be natural at growing what are multiple complex businesses. And I think that's the kind of balance. That doesn't mean you can't run your one or two very good businesses and you know how to do it and you know the processes, because those are learnt skills. But there's something about the desire and appetite for, I want to create something new. I've seen an opportunity. I'm going after it, all guns blazing. And being successful on a large proportion of the opportunities that you go after. I do think there's some innate skill within that as well. Innate ability.
I think that's so interesting, Mike, because there is that balance. If you go back to the sporting analogy, and Dave, I'd love your views on this in a second. You've got that amazing skill set, but you also need that drive, that motivation, that mental strength and resilience, don't you? And for me, the best elite athletes, whether it's football, whatever sport, have both. They have the innate ability, but they really have worked at it to get better and better and better. And we're talking absolute elite here, right? But actually, you can achieve a lot. There are some great examples of workman-like footballers, for example, who have made the most of their kind of not elite level skill by just being relentless, working really, really hard and having mental strength and just keeping going. And I think so for me, there's a bit of balance there, I think. David, any further thoughts on that?
I do agree. I think, as I say, when it can be taught, I think you can be given and shown and supported. I do think there is a slight difference when you see someone that's kind of very entrepreneurial. I'm going to use quite a nice quote here, which is a quote from Einstein: "Imagination is more important than knowledge." And, I love the quote because it's such a true thing. If we've got the imagination, if we can see what the outcome or the journey might look like, if we can focus, then there's a good chance that we will get there. And I think this is where we can distinguish people that, will succeed in a different way. They've got this imagination, they've got this passion, they've got this drive, they're devoted to the outcome and the cause. And I think, I agree. I think anybody can be a small business owner. Anybody can start a business. And absolutely, if you want to do it, go and do it. You can still be super successful. And success, by the way, is very, individual. We all might look at success in a slightly different way. But, success will be running a business and, living a lifestyle that you want to live, and whether that's you're dreaming of planes and yachts and fancy holidays, or it's just living a comfortable life and spending time with my family and putting food on the table. So it's different for us all. But you look at someone like David Beckham, to go back to your question, Romesh, he worked hard. He wasn't the amazing footballer. He spent time, and his passion was football. He wanted to be the best, and he was out there on a Friday, a Saturday, a Sunday, every day of the week, trying, pushing himself, trying new things, and look where it took him. So look, I think there's scenarios. I don't think there's any right or wrong or one size that fits. I just think if you've got the passion, if you've got the drive, you've got that fire in your belly and that determination, then the answer is yes, you can do it.
I still think this. I agree with what you're saying there, David. But I think one that we've come across a lot on Strive and Thrive, and it was on the John Dyack episode significantly, is around humbleness of founders and their willingness to learn about what they're good and not good at. To your point, when you start, you're the master of everything, and by a year in, you realize you're not the master of anything and you're just doing everything. But you slowly build people up around you and you find where you're really strong. And I think it's the ability to learn and adapt on that journey of foundership and entrepreneurship, and then to a point with which you go, I'm the wrong person to run this business now, or I need to only do this part of it, and I'll go and do something else because that's where I'm much better playing. And I think it's that journey and humbleness that is also a massive part of what I'm seeing when I talk to people like yourself.
And I agree. And if you take, I'm going to use an engineer being an example, someone that's kind of in engineering, manufacturing, and they start a business. Their passion is making something, that's their passion. That is their skill. That is what they're brilliant at. And they start a business, and the business acumen, they've got some of it. Of course they have, but it's not what they're good at, and it's not what they enjoy either. So that's when they surround themselves with great people, the best accountant, or someone that can do finance, the best marketeer, the best salespeople, the best administrators. But their passion is not to necessarily run the business. Their passion is to do what they love. And I think that's really important. We don't lose that as business owners. Why did you start the business in the first place? If it's for the money, then there's probably a chance that it won't succeed anyway. If you're totally focused on the money, there's a chance it won't succeed. Not always, because sometimes it will, but lots of people start a business because they have a belief they can do it bigger, they can do it better, they can make a difference, they can change the world in their own little way. We do it because maybe we want to earn more money. So you come out of employment. I ask the question, why do you want to start a business? Well, I work for so-and-so. I want more time, more flexibility. I want to be in control of my own destiny. Okay, I want to earn more money, and I can see the way they do it, and I know if I can do it better. Go and ask them in a year's time, how's that going for you? I'm working more hours, never worked so bloody hard, and earning less money than I've earned. But that's just the journey of, transitioning from working from somebody to running your own business. Another year down the line, things pivot back the other way. So it's an interesting stance. I think we all do it for different reasons, and I think most people don't do it for the money. I think the money becomes the side effect. Of course, they want to make money, but they're not dreaming of big houses and flashy yachts and jets and stuff like that. And they're dreaming that they can be in control of their own destiny.
It was interesting. I ran an entrepreneurship course the other month, and I said to the room, how many people want to become founders and entrepreneurs? And only about half put their hand up. I think it was a confidence thing. But when I asked questions, what was clear to me was a couple of them thought it was, I want to be the boss, I want to earn lots of money. And I was like, firstly, that's a fascinating insight that such a large cohort thought that. But what was really interesting with those who didn't put their hands up, they wanted to make movies and they wanted to be an actor. And I was like, entrepreneurship's a great learning curve for you in that world. And it was making them realize they can make good movies. And that's as much being an entrepreneur as it is becoming a business owner almost, which was the logic some people had automatically associated with it. And I thought that was such an interesting moment for me to reflect on how people see entrepreneurship.
I think, some the golden nuggets for me there are, you're talking about following your passions, aren't you? Having that drive, that real desire in a certain area, whatever it is, to help others, to solve problems, and also, to your point, Mike, to take risks. Right, this is an area where you need to take risks, don't you, to succeed, creating those opportunities, but then following through. So that's it's something we've seen regularly on this podcast, and I think it's an important lesson.
Yeah.
Sorry,
are you seeing any trends at the moment, Dave, with those entrepreneurs that you're working with at Anglia University, for example, or with some of the bodies that you're working as part of, trends in entrepreneurship that maybe are different from when you were doing it, or what are the signals you're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, so first off, just a bit of a shout out for ARU, one of the top entrepreneurial universities in the east of England, and 10 in the country as well. So in the top 10 in the country, which is testament to to the students and the team. What I sit within called Area, which is Anglia Ruskin Enterprise Academy. It's all about giving the the entrepreneur and enterprise stance. Look, I just think now it's socially acceptable to run your own business. going back, lots of people didn't want to own their own business. It just didn't quite fit with what the world told us. And it was the brave that went on the journey of starting their own business, going back 20, 30, 40 years. But now it's socially acceptable. It's almost like, why are you working for somebody? You love what you do what you love. Why don't you do it yourself? And I think it's easier to start a business today than it ever has been. But I also think it's the toughest time to start a business. The red tape is immense.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I go back, the health and safety, the employment law. I go back to when I started my business. God, I want to tell you what an employment law really even meant. And health and safety, well, that was just, you just put a hard hat on and a high vis, and add some safety boots. It was as simple as that. But now it's become much more complex. And look, for the best as well. I'm not saying we shouldn't have these rules and regulations and, red tape in place. But it has become, in my opinion, too much. You spend more time administrating a business than you do developing and moving it forwards. So you have to have people around you who are good at doing that, because make the wrong turn now, say the wrong things, do the wrong thing at the wrong time. You're sitting there answering probably to somebody in a courtroom or authority or something like that. You've got to be on it like a car bonnet these days.
David, I couldn't agree more with that point. I think we're trying as a society to create a better environment for entrepreneurs, and as you say, the environment has improved. It's become much more socially normal, I think, to take that step forwards. But I think there are better ways to approach the encouragement of helping and supporting smaller growing businesses, right? Yeah, there is too much red tape. There's too much to navigate. And when you're trying to create these environments where people just take these steps forwards and go boldly ahead with their plans, when there's lots of hurdles, lots of complex scenarios to navigate, that just slows things down. And I really liked your point that, a lot of these regulations are important and we shouldn't underestimate how important they are. But perhaps they need to be more nuanced and they need to be more layered and, perhaps adapted to the size of businesses. As a CFO of a growing business, we were setting up, essentially a small investment fund, and we were treated essentially as a kind of £100 million business, and we needed to essentially follow all the regulations that equivalent size business had to do. And it was just so onerous, time consuming, costly, distracting from actually the main purpose of the business, which was to drive forwards, grow, create jobs, create great products for our clients, our customers. So I'm with you there, Mike. Yeah, sorry. What's your view on it?
I found the same problem, to be honest. Setting up my first business was actually not too difficult because you can almost be a little bit naive and go for it. But interestingly, the second one has been much more challenging, and you're in this position where you're going, whoa, I've suddenly got to put a lot more money behind it before you've even made that early market traction, which you want to kind of achieve, which is the best practice in what you tell any entrepreneur. Just get going, go and sell a few bits, get going, tackle each. When it was my second business, much harder. My third, which I'm looking at now, I'm waiting for as long as I possibly can before I move, which is such a shame because we could employ people, but we're not going to because it'd be the wrong move to make because it's so complicated. And I see that in universities as well, when they've got rich research, really good ideas, and you want those teams to go, but the barrier to move is quite significant. And when you haven't got the right team in there to support them and know what they should or shouldn't do, how they can make incremental, minimal investment just to move them, that's a really hard. And they can suddenly be 25 grand down on lawyer fees.
Yeah, and I think it's a really valid point, though. I think when you set up your first business, you're a bit more naive. you don't know what you don't know. So it's just kind of like, well, let's just get on and do it. And you learn as you go, which is great. That's what life is about. I used the analogy earlier. Every day is a school day. You're always learning. But when you do your second one, well, you know what you've got to do. So you now can't go, well, I didn't know that, because you've been there and done it, and you've got to do it. So, and then when you come to your third, you've learned a lot more. So you know how much more you've got to do. And it just compounds up, doesn't it? So, but I would say to anybody thinking of starting their own business, do not let this put you off. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Running a business is not easy. It's great fun. It's not for everybody. Go out there, try it. If it's not for you, nothing lost, nothing gained, as long as you haven't put your house and your life on it. But it's going to be tough. It's going to have good days and bad days. Just hope the good days outweigh the bad days. They do in 99% of the cases. But just go out, just do it. Just don't do anything that's going to get you in, arrested. So keep away from fraud and anything that's criminal. Then you'll be pretty safe. The rest of it's not a problem.
I'd recommend anybody go and do it.
Yeah, an essential caveat there, David. Yeah, but yeah, as Mike says, it's just get on and go for it. Be sensible about it, but be brave. If you've got something to offer. I was
talking to a lady last month, and she was looking at setting up her own business, quite small, quite niche, quite sort of personal experience business. But she was doing the business case, and she was getting advice on how to set up the team and how to run the business and how to do the legal requirements. And I said to her, just go, get your first customer, get paid, let that follow. And I do think, I know we're putting caveats in on our previous conversation, but you're exactly right, David and Romesh. You've got to go. If you believe in it, go for it. And you will be able to tackle them and set it up. But I think therefore we're not trying to put people off. We're just trying to say that the environment at the moment is difficult for entrepreneurs. It's difficult for new businesses because the economy is tough, and it's difficult in the UK because the regulatory context is really quite hard in the UK at the moment, and not as supportive for entrepreneurs as perhaps it was.
Yeah. Let me give you a quick scenario. When we were doing some projects, now this was several years ago now, in South Africa. We worked for a large private healthcare over there. Probably it is the biggest in South Africa, and they're in Switzerland as well. And they were building a new hospital. Now, I've got photos of this, and I appreciate I haven't got them to put on the screen now, but they were building this hospital, and the workers were in bare feet, building, using rollers, flattening the ground, and I just look at that, and here we are dressed up to our nines in safety boots, safety goggles, hard hats, harnesses, because we're hanging out of, windows and stuff. And then you see that side. And, I'm sure their fatality levels are up here. It must be, it's got to be, or, certainly accident level. So I get why we have this red tape, of course, because that is the extreme of one side. But we do need to have common sense. But this is the problem. So many people don't have common sense. They walk out in front of a car coming or something silly like that, or a bus. So we've got to have these rules and regulations to protect everybody. We don't all need them because we've got common sense, but not everybody's got that.
Yeah, it's kind of trying to cater for the worst cases, I suppose. But yeah, I think there's ways to nuance it, and it doesn't have to be one rule applies to every business of every size. I think it can be layered, and that's certainly what I would recommend. Mike, you touched on the uncertainty that we're facing now, and David, I'd love to understand more about what you think. That there is economic uncertainty right now with what's going on in the world, at a national level, at an international, global level. There's other multiple change that's occurring, AI, lots of other things going on. How do you think businesses can manage? Because my sense is a lot of businesses are finding things difficult at the moment.
Yeah. As I said earlier, I think now is a great time to start a business. And actually the last 5, 6, 7 years have. But hey, God, hasn't it been tough for all of us, whether you run a business or not? The days of COVID, the impact. Funny, I've had a message from someone this morning saying I'm not running my business anymore. COVID literally wiped me out. And, I kind of look at this and I just think we are in challenging times. Economically, I say we talk about this red tape, that's just one piece of it. But at the time of recording, we're in a ceasefire, apparently, with Iran at the moment. But, let's be honest, is that going to last? Well, hopefully it does, but it's not looking too promising for various different reasons. Let's not get political. But this is impacting, global economies. It's impacting the UK economy. For those that drive diesel or petrol cars, I feel super sorry for you. The price of fuel, now is staggering. I saw yesterday, I think the price I saw was 203 or 204.9 for a litre of diesel. I mean, and what's the impact here? Well, that's the impact on that small business maybe filling up their vehicle, their car, their van. But if you take that onto a grander scale, logistics of moving goods around the country, and we're talking maybe our retailers here, getting food on the shelves of, your top supermarkets, that means prices of food's going to go up. Farmers getting, the food from the land, from harvesting and stuff like that, putting, red diesel as they use in their tractor. That's nearly 4 times what it was. So these impacts are significant. And there might be small little things, but they're all adding up. And then we add on top of that, everything else that's happened with energy costs, taxes. God forbid, the spring budget might loom on us. I don't know. But these are all things that are going to change the way we work, how we work. Throw in AI. Look, I'm a great technologist. I love technology. I love AI. I'm working with businesses, helping them roll out AI and understand what they can do, how they can benefit from it. But again, it's taking jobs. Let's not beat around the bush. Jobs are being diminished because of technology. Jobs are being created, but they're also being, lost as well. And you look at the big players in the market, Oracle, was it 30,000 jobs last week they took out? And their reasoning is not because AI is replaced, but because we're going to go and spend that money in the AI arena. Salesforce, 5,000 jobs. Klarna, Klarna halved their workforce. Even Spotify, are not now, their coders are not even writing code anymore. Their coders are watching AI create the code and they're just checking it afterwards, supposedly. So we're in a world of change. A perfect storm, I think was the word you used, Mike, earlier before we come on live on there. You said we're in a perfect storm, and I couldn't agree more.
I think the only bit and this is me with my own entrepreneurship or ideas hat on, is it also creates opportunities, but it's about founders and entrepreneurs seeing the world as it is right now and seeing where the risks are and where the opportunities are, and continually evaluating what's going on, because we can't second guess what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months because there's too many moving parts. But I think what we can do is see where the opportunities still might sit, where the risks sit, and manage your business carefully. The challenge it has in that kind of time frame is it's difficult to make big investment decisions. It's difficult to make big leaps of new product development or new business setups. It's much more risky, so you've got to take much more short-term based approaches, I think. And that's what I would recommend to any startup business anyway. So I just think they're very natural to working in that kind of environment.
Obviously, Mike, I hesitate to support you so wholeheartedly there, but no, I mean, absolutely right. It's there is opportunity there, but no one can predict the future. We're at a time where the future is more uncertain than ever, but don't let that stop you. Look at opportunities, keep up as best you can. One of the things I do in terms of AI is I follow David Slolley's AI newsletter. David was a previous guest of ours. He writes a lovely kind of summarized version of events in terms of AI, what's going on there, for example. But I think it's very difficult to be right at the cutting edge. You can't do, there's too much going on, but do your best, try and keep up with the main themes. But one of the key phrases Mike used just then is manage your business carefully through this process. I think be cautious, be considered. Now's the time to make sure that you're still there and functioning and robustly operating as opportunities present themselves, because because I think these times of uncertainty can be a time where lots of businesses struggle significantly and ultimately fail. Right, so you've just got to keep, from my perspective, keep sure you're operating, so you can take advantage of the better opportunities, the good times as they present themselves going forwards. We can't predict the future, but they will turn. I'm an economist, and I believe in cycles, as we talked about earlier, and it's staying the course, I would say.
Yeah. And I don't want to be doom and gloom. Just make that very clear. I'm a very, optimistic, positive individual, and people that know me and work with me will support that. But I'm also a realist. We've got to be aware of what's happening around us and be prepared. Whether you want to call it prepping or, being, kind of forecasting your own future. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't have a magic wand or a silver bullet, but we need to make the best of opportunities. And one of the things I'll add in, because I mentioned this kind of off air, is that we, as business owners, and I use the word small businesses, but that can be small, medium-sized businesses or even larger corporates, we need to help each other. We need to support each other. We need to collaborate. We need to look at how we can work together to get the best out of, us and our teams. And competition exists. We know that. But, that doesn't matter. It's healthy competition. We need competition. But there's no reason competitors can't partner. They can't collaborate, because everybody brings something to the table. So I suppose my word really is kind of, work together, help each other. Don't always do it for the money. Do it because you want to help somebody else. And if we all have that mindset, I think we can all change the world together.
It's a very inspiring message there, David. And I think look for the win-win. And keep going and take heart that things will get better, will improve, and opportunities will present themselves. And actually, we've talked about the hardships of lots of uncertainty, lots of things changing rapidly, but it's an environment where lots of opportunities are created too. So I think that's a really important point. I think it's probably time to start kind of wrapping up the conversation now. And David, I'm very reluctant to do that, because there's so much great stuff that we've chatted about. And I know there's so much more we could cover as well. But I really enjoyed it. Mike, what are your key takeaways from our chat today?
I've got a number, but the one I've written down is, what is entrepreneurship? And I know we touched on that for a decent part of the call. And I'm just going to leave it open to ask yourself the question as a listener to this, of what's it mean to you? And what do you need to know about entrepreneurship? And what does entrepreneurship look for yourself? Because yes, we could get formal on definitions, but really it's about what's your own entrepreneurship journey. And to your point, and I think I like your idea of collaboration. Actually, I do think there's a topic onto itself there that we could go on to, but I think the big one is, it is socially more acceptable nowadays to set up your own business. And yes, things are tough, as we touched on, but there are opportunities. And if you want to do it, go for it.
Brilliant. No, I think you've summarized that really, really well. We covered lots of areas here, whether you're an innate entrepreneur or whether, you can learn. Mike, as you said, everyone's different, and, forge a path forwards, go for it if that's something that you're interested in. We talked about passion, we talked about drive, resilience. We covered so many areas, but I'd just like to kind of round off by saying, David, it's been an absolute pleasure. You've provided us with lots of insights. I loved your early entrepreneurship stories. I love the key learnings that you've brought to the table, and I really like your kind of win-win approach. Let's work together to kind of pull through what's a difficult time. And I think that's a really good, strong message. And ultimately, whilst we're acknowledging, I think all three of us saying, it's not easy at the moment, but keep going, right? Keep going, and you will get there. So once again, thank you very much, David.
Thank you,
I'd like to thank everyone very much for listening or watching to the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode as much as Mike and I have. Strive and Thrive is a podcast for entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders. Please like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. See you next time. Thank you for listening to Strive and Thrive.